Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Special Committee on Government Records Retention. Today is Wednesday, September 16th. With us, committee members, we have the Honourable Peter Bevan-Baker, Gore McNeely, Hal Perry, Sydney McEwen, and Corey Deagle. And visiting with us is also Ola Hammerlin. This is a special committee that was created based on motion 86, and that motion is there for anybody to read. And I will now call the meeting to order, and I'll ask for somebody to move the agenda. So, Sydney? Okay, and as per our agenda, today is a briefing on the technical process of email record deletion and IT matters relevant to the Information and Privacy Commissioner Order number FI 20007. And with us today, we have John Brennan, Director of Business Infrastructure Services, and Scott Cudmore, Director of Enterprise Architecture. So on behalf of the committee, I'd like to welcome you here today. And how would you like to proceed? I know it's a pretty lengthy presentation that you have with us today. Would you prefer questions to be held until the end, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Go through the presentation and take questions.
Okay. If that's okay with the committee, then we'll proceed with the presentation, and I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for your time today. So today we wanted to go over and just give you an overview of government's data storage, some specifics around your questions around email retention, things of that nature. So we thought this presentation would give you a general good overview, and which I'll go over, and then Scott will address some of the records management activities. So to give you perspective, as of the end of August, the government is backing up just over 116 million files every day. A file can be anything. It can be a database containing millions of records. It can be a group-wise archive containing thousands of emails. It could be a simple 30-minute video, a WordPerfect Word document. So right now, government's data is totaling 1.7 petabytes of data, which we replicate. So it's about just over 1,700 terabytes or 1.8 million gigabytes of data that the government is holding right now, electronically. We believe the data should be considered old and stale. About 85% of government's data was created over a year ago. 77% of government's data has not been accessed in over a year. And when it has been accessed, 87% of it has not been modified. To give you perspective, too, the oldest WordPerfect document we have on the network was created in 1997. However, I would say there would be older records and files within government's electronic records. We would have databases that would have records older than that, as well as there'd be emails and group-wise archives that would be older, but just wanted to give you perspective of the age of our data. We've seen a significant amount of growth in data, especially since 2017 with the new records management legislation and what's going on in government. So some examples of what's driving some of our increases in data is departments are increasing the digital services offered by government. So more online web interactions which are creating electronic records. Departments themselves are becoming more digital in their workflows. So for example, the Department of Agriculture is now flying drones, taking videos, which we're now storing those videos on the network. Also, the systems government historically uses are continuing to be modified and improved. So in healthcare, the medical imaging software in the cancer treatment center, the images are getting more crisp and clear and are taking up more storage. So as some of the improvements in technology occur, we're storing more data as well. Since 2017, with the passing of the new legislation, we saw a significant increase with the departments arriving at ITSS with data. So historically, several of the departments were just keeping data on flash drives. They would have bought external hard drives themselves, had kept it. With the passing of the legislation, we saw an influx of data into IT shared services, into our enterprise level storage and backup environments. So it's one of the reasons we saw an increase since 2017. Data storage costs. Last fiscal, we spent approximately $3.9 million related to electronic storage, and we're budgeted for $2.66 million this year. This is a combination of continuing to upgrade the technology itself. So as technology becomes end of sale, end of support, we purchase new technology, as well as it also is the dollars we're spending against the data growth, the actual storage capacity itself. We're also seeing in the last couple of years, data is being moved into cloud providers. So just as much as on-premises data that we're holding within the province in our data centers, we're funding that through our capital budgets. As departments are moving services to online cloud, that storage is being stored with the cloud providers, and that cost is moving from capital to operational dollars because the cloud providers charge subscription fees monthly for the amount of data used. So we're seeing both capital and operation dollars spent around that. And also we're looking at ensuring that RIM policies and access are not only maintained within government's data on premises, but within the cloud providers that government signs contractual relationships with. Storage and backup, just to give you kind of an overview of government's on-site storage, we standardize on Dell Storage. We have several components of that. So we have Dell Unity, which is our fastest and most expensive storage array. This is really used for applications and databases for very quick access to data that users in government would need. We have what's called Isilon, which is mid-tier storage. It's used for more older data, and it is specifically designed for multimedia storage. So videos and audio recordings are mostly stored in this tier. And we have what's called ECS, Elastic Cloud Storage. This is the cheapest and slowest storage. And I would say when we say slow, we're talking milliseconds. So it's not slow, but in relation to what an application would need to access data real time. And we move a lot of the older stale data that's not being accessed by government users or departments into this more cost-effective storage array. On top of those, we have what's called our data domain. This is our backup solution where we compress data and store it and duplicate it across government. And this is primarily used for disaster recovery or business continuity needs for the departments. We also have a certain amount of local server storage. So there are some applications that run locally on servers. This data is not stored in our Dell storage arrays. However, we do back it up into the data domains. Wanted to give you, I know there's been some discussions about our backup, so wanted to give you kind of a documentation of what our backup process is. We have about 85% of government servers are on virtual servers, which every night we do a full backup every night and retain that backup for 3 months. The last backup of the month is retained for 365 days, and then all the data is duplicated daily between our data domains and our data centers. Physical servers, which is approximately 15% of our environment. We do incremental backups every night, so we can see what's changed every day from server to server. We only back up the incremental changes, and we retain those for 3 months. We do a full data backup every weekend, and we retain that backup for 3 months, and the last backup of the month is retained for 365 days. And again, that is duplicated in our data domains across our data centers. Our Isilon storage, which again is mostly the video and audio storage. We snap each night and duplicate between our data centers. Those snaps are kept for 3 months. We do incremental backups every other night, and those are saved for 3 months. The full backups are run every Friday night and saved for 3 months. And again, the last full backup of the month is saved for 365 days. And again, data is duplicated between our data centers. What do we back up? So right now, ITSS is only backing up data on our network. We do not back up individual computers, and we do not back up mobile devices such as phones or tablets. Just to give you an overview of our emails, so last month, government sent just about 750,000 emails. We received just over 1 million emails, and we blocked about 2.8 million spam or malicious emails. I would use this, August is typically our quietest month with vacations and the such, so I view this as a low watermark for a monthly call volume, for email volume, for what government is receiving and sending. Group-wise archives, I know there's been some discussion around this, we wanted to address this. So prior to 2015, users had the abilities to select the locations of their archives, and they selected multiple locations. Mostly the reason was for limited home internet and VPN issues. So if you were going away on a trip, or if you were going to work at home for the weekend and you couldn't didn't want to come into the office, you would go in, save your archives to your local hard drive or to a flash drive, take it home and work, etc. In 2015, we launched a project to consolidate government's networks. So prior to that, we had 12 individual networks running throughout the government. We consolidated to a core government, a core network, a health network, and an education network. Through that work, we migrated and standardized. So as of 2015, users were no longer able to select the location of their archives. We consolidated those to a network drive, so all archives, group-wise archives, go to a single location, and users are not allowed to select alternate locations. Through that process as well, we searched the networks and devices that we had access to, and we consolidated group-wise archives. So in 2015, we absolutely found individuals that had multiple archives, and at the time as we found them, we consolidated them into the single archive and put them into that location. In addition, to make you aware, through that process, we absolutely found a lot of what we deemed orphan data. We found data in the networks and in systems that we couldn't identify an owner to. So we created records management servers and put all the orphan data into those records management servers and gave access to the records management officers in each department. So they had the ability to go in, review the data, and then assign ownership to that orphan data. Just to make you aware of that. GroupWise and smartphones. I know there's been some discussion around that. So really from our perspective, GroupWise is a dead technology. It has a limited market share. There's no real development occurring in the marketplace for it. We take steps to stabilize the system and make sure that it's accessible for the government users. So users who get a new smartphone need to have no more than 5,000 emails in their inbox when we transfer them to a new phone to allow the mobility servers to sync up between the GroupWise main system and the smartphone. So if a user calls in and asks for a new phone, we would go in and say, you have 10,000 emails in your inbox. Before we can provide you the new phone, you need to take actions to get down to 5,000, whether that's archiving your emails, deleting spam or personal or transitory emails out, and once you hit the 5,000, we would then migrate you to the new phone. And this just allows for a smooth transition to the phone and a stability of the system. Departmental requests for the land forms between 2007 and 2018. We've received approximately 2,800 employee change forms. And in 2017, we modified the form, so now we require the records management officer for each department to physically sign and confirm that all records have been dealt with appropriately before we take any actions in regards to those forms. I know there were questions around Mr. Mix's email archives and the duplicate archives. So on March 17th, Mr. Mix reported a problem to ITSS because he discovered time periods of missing emails from his archives. That day, we sent a technician out. In the process of troubleshooting, the technician made a copy of the email archive of Mr. Mix's. And at that point forward, the emails were only going to Mr. Mix's original archive. The copy was not accessible by Mr. Mix. So it had been kept pristine since March 17th, 2015. That's when Mr. Mix had two archives. So at the time, in 2019, we discovered the two archives. In 2019, we were asked by the Deputy Minister to assist Mr. Mix in some searches in his GroupWise to make sure he was doing it properly. Everything was located. We sent two technicians over to Mr. Mix's office. At that time, when the technicians were there, we discovered that the second archive existed. And that's why Mr. Mix had two archives, but Mr. Mix did not have access to that second archive. So he had his current archive, and the second copy of the archive was sitting there on not touched since the March 17th date. Just want to give you an overview, kind of our improvements around records management and the such. So ITSS was formed in the 2006-2007 timeframe. Just to give you perspective, prior to the formation of IT Shared Services, there were about 6 IT teams across government. There were 12 different networks supporting, and there were 14 different service desks you could call for IT support. So government consolidated ITSS in 2006, 2007. As I stated, we started updating our networks, consolidating them in 2012. 2015, we standardized on the group-wise archiving. 2016, we developed the RIM strategy, worked on that. Scott will speak to that later in the presentation. In 2017, we updated the new employee change forms requiring records management sign-off. In 2018, we ran an alfresco pilot around records management and data or electronic records. And we implemented, this year, we're implementing and releasing an RFP for an electronic records management system. I know there were questions of why would a file become inaccessible or not recoverable? Possibility we spoke to earlier, possibility of multiple archives and some of those archives being not kept on the network or not visible to IT shared services. That possibility would have been prior to 2015. There is file corruption. However, if there is file corruption, we do have, as noted earlier, we have 365 days to go back and retrieve a previous version of the corrupt file. Sometimes during software upgrades as well, data can become corrupted. But again, if it's identified to us, we have the 365 days to go back to retrieve the historical data. And in addition, deletion, including errors, movements, saving over files. Again, we've had 365 days. We every day it's an occurrence within government that we'll get a phone call, someone saying, I can't find my files. I don't know where that folder went. They've just either by mistake or the such have moved it, deleted it, something has happened. We can easily restore it to the previous day's settings through our backup process. From our perspective, because of the passage of time in relation to Mr. Mix's emails or any requests, we're limited to that 365 days. If someone calls us and says, I can't find something, we'll go look for it. But if it was deleted after the 365 days, it's flushed from our system. We don't have visibility or the ability to retrieve it. And I'll pass it off to Scott.
If you'll operate the slides. For the transcript, it's Scott Cudmore speaking. In November of 2016, IT Shared Services was asked by government to collaborate with the Public Records and Archives Office in the creation of a 3-year record information strategy, which was composed of both records management, resource increases, but also there was an information technology element to it, and that was a pilot to be conducted on electronic document management and, more importantly, electronic records information management. So we completed the creation of the 3-year strategy within the month of November, and it was tabled in the legislature in December of 2016. So after some initial planning, preparation, and training of a group from early childhood development and the Department of Education, we ran this pilot from January to March of 2018. You got a slide, John? Thanks. So within that 3-month period, we learned a lot about electronic records information management and electronic document management. And I'm just going to review the top 3 findings that we discovered. So the first one is perhaps the most critical from a government perspective, and that is that introducing records management steps into an existing workflow resulted in about a 10% reduction in capacity for that workflow. So that means if you're providing service to a citizen, you're going to lose 10% of your capacity to provide that service. We also found that employees were challenged by these RIM steps, even though they were electronic in nature, when faced with a heavy workload commitment. So you have 2 problems there. One is work units under heavy workload are going to be asked to give up 10% of their productivity through the adoption of electronic records management. Ultimately, and perhaps the final finding that we discovered is that the product that we were using, which was called Alfresco, and its records information management module was not suitable for the government of PEI. It has been used in other jurisdictions to effect. It's used throughout the United States, but for the government of Prince Edward Island, it was just not going to do the job for us for a variety of reasons, but the main one is that 10%. Last slide. So where are we? I guess, what is our current state with regards to electronic records management? As John had mentioned, in one of the improvements, ITSS implemented a new change form that allows you to request changes to an employee, and that change form now includes RIM requirements. A RIM coordinator needs to sign off on the fact that records have been dealt with appropriately. We have since decided to standardize on Microsoft Office 365, and that will be our office automation software, replacing GroupWise and WordPerfect. We're also in the process of procuring a records management solution that will work and integrate very tightly into Office 365 that will become a part of the workflow of Office 365 and the creation of documents and therefore records for government. So we actually have the RFP and it's ready to be posted regarding a number of specifications. Perhaps for the purposes of the committee, it might be interesting to know that because of that sort of the manual nature of our pilot, that was one of the reasons why we had the 10% decrease in productivity. And so we realized that we need an automatic method or mechanism for classification of a variety of different documents. And to that end, we will be specifying that we would like to see a machine learning or an artificial intelligence capability in the records management solution, so that we can train this machine learning algorithm and this artificial intelligence to recognize the types of records that government produces and automatically classify those. So there'd be there would be it's more of a suggestion that the algorithm will provide to the user, but ultimately the user will say, yes, that's that type of record. So with this, we know from the industry that you get about a 90% accuracy rate on the determination of what the record is, which is pretty good if you look at perhaps the 75% accuracy rate that people provide. So it's more efficient and faster, and it provides better classification of records. And I believe that is the end of our presentation.
That's great, thank you. It wasn't as much, more slides than what I was thinking it would take time. Okay, so we'll open it up for questions. Peter?
Chair, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate all the time you clearly put into this presentation. I think perhaps I'll start at the very end and move backwards, since that's freshest in my mind. Clearly, this move to use Office 365 is an enormous project. Can you give us some sense of what the time frame will be for implementation, or for that transition from where we are now to be fully incorporated with Office 365?
So we'll be starting in the next month or so the pilot migrations of users. I think currently the project is estimating about an 18-month implementation.
Chair?
Oh, sorry, Peter.
Thanks. And that would be 18 months from now, government would have completely transitioned to
Correct.
Microsoft
So
Office.
that would include all core government departments, healthcare, and education.
Okay.
Peter?
Thanks, Chair. I notice on that slide that you have an RFP out. I'm assuming that Microsoft 365 is it's a sole provider if you're going for a particular product. So what is the RFP? How many people are you reaching out to with that RFP?
To the industry in general, there are several products that actually integrate in with Microsoft Office 365, and so we can have a good competitive process. Just a slight correction, we have not posted the RFP yet, but we have completed the RFP and we're ready to post it.
Okay.
Peter?
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned in the when we piloted Alfresco as a potential backup solution, that you abandoned that because it was not suitable for government. And the main reason, I think, John, you mentioned was that the 10% reduction in capacity or work efficiency. We all know that when something new is added to, or if you move to something else, there's a learning curve there, and inevitably there's a reduction in capacity as one learns that. Mm-hmm. Did this pilot go on long enough for us to know whether that 10% reduction in capacity was just a temporary situation or whether you expected that to be an ongoing issue?
Yeah, so we did initially, as part of the preparation, provide training. One of the other findings, which is not mentioned here, is that the amount of training that we provided could be extended, and we would in fact probably see a reduction in that 10% loss of capacity. The problem was in automation in the product. While we could automate aspects of the workflow within that product, we did sort of a balancing act between, okay, you know, what would it cost us to automate these processes? It would involve perhaps some programming time, design, etc. And of course, the other factor with the overall cost of the product itself and what it was bringing to us, the other factor that occurred, of course, is that decision was made to along these time periods to move towards Office 365. But those were very early days. But in realizing that, we looked at what would the cost be to automate these processes within this product versus waiting and for Office 365. Because we did do, as part of the pilot, some research into products that would be available for Office 365. And of course, in the intervening years, there's been a mad rush by a number of companies to come up with an AI solution, right, to records management itself.
Peter?
And I realize, of course, I mean, things move quickly in every aspect of our lives and in this world, but perhaps none more so than in the area that you gentlemen work in. And the 3-year pilot was started in December 2016, I believe.
Yeah,
that was
December,
when the strategy was.
January, yeah.
So when did we start using Alfresco, and who would have made that decision to go with that product as part of the RIM strategy?
We started looking at Alfresco actually in about 2010 as a potential cost-effective way to introduce electronic document management into the province. At the time, it was actually an open source solution, very reasonably priced. In comparison with the typical implementation costs of a tier 1 document management system, which can, the implementation project for these products can run into millions of dollars. This was quite reasonable to get involved with Alfresco and to start using it for document management. So the person that actually made that decision was myself as enterprise architect, right? Again, the idea here was to get familiar with the capabilities of the product and what we would need to do in order to actually use it. Now, I will make a differentiation between electronic document management and electronic records management. So Alfresco as an electronic document management solution was fine for government. In fact, we're still using it today for electronic document management. It's the introduction of Microsoft Office, right, which comes with a product called SharePoint that would make us rethink the decision to go with Alfresco, plus the realization that it would not be suitable for electronic records management with the province.
Peter?
I appreciate that distinction, and not being an expert in this field, I'm not sure I entirely grasp it, but I appreciate the fact that that Alfresco may have been suited for some of the purposes that we were hoping, but not all of them.
Correct.
When you mentioned 2010 as the time that you were considering, or that you first thought of Alfresco as a potential solution as an open source software, was Microsoft 360 available at that time, and did you consider it then? The reason I ask this question is absolutely up front it appears to be, from what you've said, although we haven't had any particular figures yet, I'll get to that in a second.
Right.
But Alfresco as a sticker price seemed like a cheaper solution, but as we all know, sometimes one buys a cheaper version and then in the long run it costs you more, and that certainly appears to be the case here. And I'm not looking to be critical here. I'm just interested in, so maybe I'll just ask that question. How much did it cost us to do this trial with Alfresco, which we're now abandoning? And how much is it going to cost us to transition to Microsoft Office 365?
The initial cost of Alfresco as used for document management was, I believe, roughly, you're kind of testing my memory here, but it was in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. So again, tier one document management system might run into the millions of dollars. So there was a significant savings just in piloting or starting out with that. We were looking at Microsoft Office, and forgive me, I can't quite remember whether Office in the cloud was an option when we did that. This would have been in 2010, right? And we did, in fact, submit a proposal to our governance body, in information technology shared service, to negotiate with Microsoft for agreement, or at least start that process. That proposal was ultimately rejected by government, and we were instructed to focus on email as opposed to Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint. So yes, we were in fact looking at this as an option. What I can't confirm is that it was Microsoft Office 365 in the cloud.
I would add though, IT shared services, I believe starting in 2013, we did start to submit capital budget requests to move to a new email platform. So that process for us, every year we would submit the request for capital to modernize our email and office productivity suites. Started around 2013, and just recently we've been given approval, and that's what's moved forward with the Office 365 implementation.
Okay. Peter, I'll do one more follow-up, and then, because I have others on the list, are you okay with that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks,
So Peter?
Chair. So if we look at the RIM strategy from December 2016, how much of that would you describe as being successfully completed, or are we pressing reset and basically starting again now that we've abandoned Alfresco?
Well, I wouldn't say we were doing a hard reset, because we did learn quite a bit from the pilot. And I guess once the question of whether or not we were confirmed with Office 365 became apparent, right, then it did not really make a lot of sense either fiscally or even from a learning training perspective to continue to pursue that avenue as far as records information management was concerned. I can't really tell you about the overall success of the RIM strategy because there's a records management component, and you would be much better served asking our provincial archivist, right, about the success of the strategy. One of the goals of the strategy was to improve compliance with records management and records management practices. And to that end, I believe we have been fairly successful as a strategy. And this would be reported in the House by the provincial archivist, I believe on an annual basis, because that was part of the strategy as well. From an information technology perspective, we were not successful in implementing an electronic records management product, but we have lessons learned, and for that it was a valuable exercise, I would say.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Gord. Ooh.
Thanks, thank you, Chair. Thanks, John and Scott, for coming in. I guess my questions are for Scott. Earlier this year, there was a serious computer security breach that resulted in the personal and business information of Islanders being lost, and apparently to criminals who were behind it. How is this resolved?
How was that resolved? That's a question. John, you want to?
So the data during the cyber event, data was removed from the government network, but we had the data backed up. So the data wasn't lost. A copy of that data was removed. So government didn't lose any data. We retained all that data. However, a copy of the data was removed by the bad actor.
Gord?
What are you aware of a ransom being paid? Did we have to pay a ransom as a province?
The ransom was not paid.
Gord?
Okay. Have you determined yet how many individuals were affected by that breach? And how much information did we lose?
There was a specific amount of data in gigabytes removed. I don't have that number. I can provide it later. I'll confirm. I believe the impacted citizens were through the Department of Agriculture, and I believe the department themselves reached out and dealt with the individuals that were impacted by the data in their department. I don't have a count of the individuals that were impacted. The department may.
Gord?
So if affected agriculture, what type of information was exposed? Was it personal information, or was it, you don't know what type of?
It was personal information of the citizens, but again, I would recommend you probably engage the department. They were dealing directly with the citizens. We weren't.
Gord?
Okay. Have either of you been interviewed by the police about this?
Yes, the incident is currently still an active police investigation, and I have had discussions with the RCMP.
Gord?
What is being done to strengthen, or was there anything done after that to strengthen those?
Yes, absolutely. We engaged several of our partners, Microsoft, Checkpoint, which is our firewall vendor, Dell, which is our storage provider. As well, we brought in independent third-party organizations that had no pre-existing relationship with government to be kind of an overarching, unbiased view. We have received several technical recommendations in order to strengthen the environment, and we are in the process of implementing those as we speak. Yes.
Gord?
Yeah, because it's just want to let taxpayers know that, that there's very. You look at PEI, we don't want it to. We want to make sure that we have as strong as we can and learn from this. Minister Compton stated that it cost around $1 million to work on. Was that money spent on updating the security system, or is that money spent to get our data back? Do you know any?
No, so the spend to date would have included, I'm assuming, kind of staff costs over time, as well as all our external vendors that we brought in to assist us in responding to the event, as well as continuing to improve our environment.
Gord?
Would you say that number was accurate, or is it going to be above that in the end, or are there still ongoing processes?
I would say that number is very accurate in regards to the response to the event. We are obviously always looking to and making requests to our operational budgets, as well as we're making submissions in our capital budgets to strengthen our IT and storage environments.
Thank you, Chair. That's
Hal?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank both of you for coming in today. Scott, back in 2017, you appeared to the Public Accounts Committee, I think on 2 occasions at least. And as I recall, you know, your presentation was very well received and very thorough, as is the case again today. By that time, you talked about the cost of data storage and data usage, and you said that the investment would be probably about $2.4 million in 2019-2020. Now, on the slide today, you said it approximately will be $3.9 million, and next year 2.6 million for that cost. Can you tell me what the difference is, what the 3.9 this year and then back down to 2.6 next year would be, and also what you have projected for a likely range of investment over the next 4 years after that to 2025?
I think I'm going to defer to John again. He's, from an infrastructure perspective, he knows the budget.
So the 3.9 million was last fiscal. So that was a combination of upgrading our technology as well as adding capacity. So when on the slide where I speak to our different storage arrays, the Unity storage is a brand new technology to us. So historically, it was a technology called VNX. Dell ended that technology and it became end of life, end of support. So the 3.9 million last year was a combination of purchasing the new Unity storage array and adding capacity. The $2.6 million scheduled for this fiscal will be to add strictly capacity to the environment. So we do projected forecasted on our data growth and we submit in our capital budget. So we'll be adding capacity. If government's data continues to grow at its current rate, we will eat up that storage in just over 2 years. So we're actually in the process of our capital budgets currently, and I have submitted recommendations to government to continue to fund new storage on premises. Having said that, we are anticipating my ability to repatriate some storage inside government. So as government moves to Office 365, all the emails will leave government servers on our premises and move to Microsoft's cloud, as well as part of the project will be to utilize long-term, not in phase 1, but long-term. Microsoft has OneDrive and SharePoint. So the OneDrive would replace users' home drives, and SharePoint would replace shared drives on our network. So the expectation is that as government moves more of its data to the cloud, we'll be able to repatriate and reuse local storage, and where my capital costs should reduce over time. The expectation is that. The expectation, though, is the operational costs, because of the monthly subscription to Microsoft, would increase on the operational budgets.
Hal?
Thank you. And Scott, back in 2017, you had talked about maybe facing some significant problems in 2025, and that the storage supply would not be enough to meet the demand. You said that this could represent a significant crisis in information technology, and you just mentioned some of the mitigation that was going on to lessen that impact in 2025. And with an annual growth rate of 60%, do you think that this will avert a potential crisis in, let's say, 2025?
I think one of the primary purposes for records information management is to provide record retention schedules that make it legitimate to delete records. Right? So records have a shelf life depending on your records retention schedule. And again, the public archivist would be able to speak to this much better than I could. But what we're discovering is that when you start a records information management program electronically, that the number of records that you have starts to increase and increase as you get more and more and more and more adoption. But mitigating that increase is the ability to delete records based upon your record retention schedule. So you eventually reach a steady state in terms of the number of records that government would need to retain at any one time, and therefore you would see sort of a leveling off on the space that you're required to store all of those records on. From an industry perspective and through research, we've discovered that around 50 million records is where that starts to occur. Now, clearly, we haven't implemented electronic records management, and as a result, and that was part of the message, I believe, to public accounts, is that we can anticipate that storage will continue to grow, and therefore the capacity cost of that will increase and increase continuously until we do, in fact, implement electronic records management.
Hal?
So back then, there was about 10,000 active users. Is that still the case, about 10,000 active users?
John?
We're averaging right now about 11,000 active users across healthcare, core government, and education, and I believe just over 22,000 students.
Hal?
Scott, just to go back to, and I guess I'll paraphrase some of your remarks, and you said back then that email deletion was like a normal process, and you just mentioned it again today, depending on the record retention schedule and such, and that's due partly to storage. So I just want to confirm, that's still the case today, is that correct?
Yes, that would be true.
Yes.
Hal?
So let's say if I wanted to go back and retrieve emails from the BINS administration, right? Is that possible? Would they still be retained on the server?
Yes.
Hal?
So basically, this is just normal. The deletion would be like just a normal, routine, standard practice within government. Is that correct?
Yes, it should be.
Hal?
Okay, back in 2017, there were 26 IT workers with the ability to service a request to delete emails. Is that number still correct today?
So I believe the number you're referencing, the 26, are the service center analysts that take calls on 3600. So the process would be that the departmental user would contact us, make a request for action to be taken on a form, on an account. We would send the land removal form, land access form, to the user. They would complete it, fill it out with their requests, with the appropriate signatures of the supervisor, director, records management, deputy minister, etc., would return it to us, and then we would action it. The 26 users at the service center specific to the deletion or removal of data would not action that. That would be our server technicians, and there are approximately 12 staff members that would have that ability to do that. So the 26 are kind of the front end that are servicing the requests, making sure the proper paperwork is completed, and such, and then they would assign it into the server technicians who have the administrative access to deal with any records or account access.
Hal?
For that clarity. So roughly how many email deletions would take place in a given year?
So the users themselves can delete emails. So I wouldn't have any visibility into what an individual user is doing within their account. So every day, any user could delete any of their emails, any of their records on the network, et cetera, et cetera. As I said, we received about, on the slide in those years, we received about 2,800 lane removal forms over, if I can go back to, go to a slide. Just trying to give you that perspective. Forget that number. Yeah, so between 2007 and 2018, we received about 2,800 forms to action.
Hal?
So they would have, so an individual can delete it from their email.
Correct.
But there's still a copy of it retained.
For 365 days.
Hal?
How many, thanks, Chair. So how many of those records then would have been deleted in a year approximately?
Off the system.
We wouldn't have ability to, we're not tracking a daily comparison before and after. We're not tracking how many records are flushed from the backups every day. As every day passes, we're not tracking that data.
Hal?
Thanks, Chair, for that. Okay.
Okay, so I'm just gonna jump in with a couple of questions before we start around again. So what's IT's main role in relation to records and records retention?
So really from my perspective, we're really caretakers of the data. So the data is owned by the departments, crowns, agencies, boards. We're really caretakers of it. So I really view we have three, from infrastructure's perspective, we kind of have three key areas of ownership. So the data needs to be available. So I need to make sure the networks are up, users can log in, they can see their data, they can access their data, they can action their data. And then we control access. So through our controls within IT, we give permissions for users to see data. So if someone wants to have an email account or access an email account or the such, we control the access. So users themselves just can't go in and go look at someone's email or look at someone's files. The appropriate person, the deputy minister or the crown head would have to give us authorization and direction to grant access. So access is critical. And then most critical from my perspective is we own disaster recovery and business continuity. So in case of a deleted file, a major disaster, we're keeping that data safe, we're replicating it in different locations so that in an event of an emergency, we have the ability and can retain government's data and give it back to the departments to continue their work. So I really view those kind of the three main areas of our responsibility.
Thank you. And when it comes to disaster recovery, and you mentioned different locations, how many different locations do we have?
Two. So the data is maintained and replicated between two distinct geographical locations.
Okay, are both of those on the island?
They are.
Okay. And so overall, is there a digital records retention strategy that encompasses everything, including the emails, text messages, and BlackBerry BlackBerry messages?
Yeah, at this point, as I stated in the presentation, we are only backing up what's on the network. We are not retaining or backing up any data specific to any endpoints. So any computers, laptops, tablets, smartphones, ITSS is not retaining any of that data. The data is resident on the specific devices themselves, and it would be up to the users to, if they felt they had created some type of record on that device, to move that record onto the network where it would be retained and backed up.
Okay, and in the case where an employee leaves government and they have those devices and computers and everything, and let's say that they were let go and they didn't have the opportunity to actually move those records over, what would be the strategy then?
So we don't retain, we're not backing up those devices. We do have management control. over those devices. So we can lock those devices, we can ensure that no one else can access them and get them, and then we would do our best to contact that employee to have them return the devices. And at that point though, but we absolutely have the ability to lock the device, control it, manage it. We're just not backing up the data on it.
Okay. And when you reviewed, so the commissioner, the Information and Privacy Commissioner stated the acting director, and I'm quoting, was also asked whether it is possible for ITSSS to determine if emails were deleted. The acting director advised that it is not possible to tell if an email was deleted. So can you tell me what process ITSS came to in order to come to that decision?
So we're not, so what we're trying is we're backing up the data every night off the network. But we are not what I would deem, we are not recording or logging keystrokes. So we're not actively, every time you take an action on your computer, every time you do something, we're not recording that activity. So we're backing the data up. I would say we have very good visibility if you're coming in and out of the government network. So if you're going to a website, if you're downloading information, if someone's VPNing into the network, so at what I would deem our edge. So once you're inside, we're not recording all your actions. We are recording all actions if you try to leave government or come into government. We have great visibility into that. But at an individual device layer, we currently are not deploying or employing any technology to get to that granular level of recording user activity.
Okay. Just going back quickly to your last statement when I asked about emails, text messages, and that kind of thing. So my understanding is that that any email resides on the server.
Correct.
And then it's pushed to computers and it's pushed to the smartphones.
Correct.
Correct. So, based on that, so the emails that are sent via the smartphones or computers are actually stored on the network.
Correct, but your reference to text messaging and other types of communications are not.
Do you have the ability to do that?
We currently do not. The technology absolutely exists to do that, but we have not purchased it or deployed it.
Okay. And has there been any reason behind that? Like, has it been a discussion within the department to do that, and it was just decided not to, or?
No, we were asked several years ago to look at the technology. I believe the minister of the day brought information back to the House around the associated cost. It was around $1 million. So right now we have approximately 2,700 what we would deem smartphones. So Apple iPhones or Android devices. So we would have to increase licensing. The technology does exist to record all actions on those phones. So it would record not only the emails, which we're already doing, but it would record text messaging. It also has the capability to record social media activities. So we could record all tweets, Instagram, Snapchats, etc. I would say our discussion with government at the time was technology absolutely exists. There's an associated cost to it. We could implement it. So for example, I believe there's 30 million applications in the Android store and about 20 million applications in the Apple store. We would, if you wanted us to record every possible platform on every device, that would be costly. So we would either have to be prepared for that or lock down the phones and limit the flexibility on the devices to limit the types of applications we would allow on government smartphones in order to maintain a certain amount of records and such on those mobile devices.
Okay, I'm gonna start another circle. I'm just gonna, another round, but I'm just gonna say, so the challenge with that is there's decisions made through text messages, whether it should or it shouldn't. So my question wouldn't be around tracking everything that they do on a smartphone, but when any application that you're able to make an actual government decision on, that would be what I would be referring to when I'm asking about tracking.
Technology is absolutely available to do that. Not only on smartphones, we're seeing tablets, etc. There's government is becoming more and more mobile in general, but there's absolutely, the technology exists. We just currently have not procured it or implemented it.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Sid, go ahead.
Are you going last?
Please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'll just start with what the Chair had mentioned there too. It's the duty of the employee to keep those text messages. So regardless if it's emails or text messages, you can delete them at will if you want, but you can't. Like, you know, it's your role and responsibility as well. I would like to. We had the Conflict of Interest Commissioner in last time, which I'm sure you're both aware. Can you? She had said that she had interviewed you, John,
Yes.
in the summer of 2019.
Yes.
And it was Karen was there, Maria McDonald was there, and the solicitor for not for the department, but for the, I forget the term, government, but Bobby Joe Dow Baker was there as well. Can you talk about that interview process from your side of things, how that was initiated, and what that conversation was? They had said they had taken notes from that meeting.
Yes. So I was asked to, Karen Rose at the time, the Privacy Commissioner, had numerous questions. I believe she had sent a letter, I'm assuming, I'm trying to remember, around 12, 15 type questions. The department and the FOIP group had asked me to sit with the Commissioner to help assist and answer the questions. So we met that summer. I believe the meeting lasted approximately 3 hours. I gave her a general overview, as I did with this group today, kind of our systems, how much we have, what we do, how we store, and then she walked through her questions. I answered them. She gave me some scenarios, asked me what would occur within those scenarios, and I answered them. So.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and she expressed her thanks and how good of a meeting was and how well informed they got after the meeting as well. They were speaking about records that were deleted from Brad Mix during a very specific time. Do you recall, I'll go back, who would have given the order for the two employees, IT employees, to go down and help Mr. Mix with the search of his records?
That request came through the Deputy Minister at the time, Deputy Minister Keedwell, asked us to go assist Mr. Mix to search his email.
Sid?
Thank you. And that was in 2015?
No, 2019. So 2015 was Brad called into our service center and identified that he couldn't find certain emails. At that point, we dispatched a general technician to assist Mr. Mix, but in 2019, Deputy Minister Keedwell asked us to meet with Mr. Mix and assist him to make sure he was doing all the searches. So we provided documentation on how to search group-wise, and made sure that our technicians went and made sure that he was doing everything appropriately and the such, that he wasn't missing a step, etc. So that's when we sent those technicians.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. So in 2015, other than the two IT employees that went, was there any investigation done into why those 2 years of records were done?
No, ITSS has not initiated any investigation. We were just responding to technical incidents requests or requests from the Deputy Minister to assist the staff.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. So, in your opinion, what are the possible reasons that those records would be missing at that time? Like, what are the possibilities that would have happened?
I don't have an opinion, but possibilities or scenarios that would relate to that would be is the records were deleted and had passed 365 days, which limited my ability to retrieve them, or they were archived to a location off the network that we didn't have visibility to. I know in the discussions with the Privacy Commissioner at the time, they kept referencing corrupt data. But I wanted to clarify that, so corrupt data we can see. So if I can see the data, I can tell you whether it's corrupt or not, and if it is corrupt data, we can have actions both internally and with third-party partners to try to recover the data that's corrupted. But with Mr. Mix's emails, there was no corruption of the data. There was just no data to see. No one was able to present us with corrupt data that they couldn't access. It was just the data wasn't there.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. And can you speak to, you know, the possibility of it being lost from an upgrade to a phone?
I think that's why I walked through the process. So at the time, with Mr. Mix was going, he believed that he had got a new smartphone, and he believed the data was possibly lost during that. We don't see any data loss typically through a migration to a new phone, but we would have directed Mr. Mix that he had to get to the 5,000 emails in order for us to provide him a new phone and migrate his account over. So we would have at that time, as our standard process would have been, is to recommend he archive or remove emails from his system to get down to the 5,000 level.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. And there's no record of any archiving at that time?
Oh, Mr. Mix has a very large archive. So, and we did through the 2015 project, I believe we found numerous copies of Mr. Mix's archives and we consolidated them. But Mr. Mix has a sizable email archive and a significant number of emails.
Sid?
Thank you. So going back to, and my apologies for saying your opinion, the reasons that that they could be missing. So you said they would either have to have been deleted or they would have to have been archived. So let's talk about the deletion. So the options for deleting those records would be either the employee did it themselves or someone else did it. Like, can you speak to the possibilities of how they could have been deleted?
So the user themselves would have access to their email account and could take that action, and ITSS would have the capability to access accounts and delete records, and we did not.
Sid?
Thank you. So, thank you for that. So ITSS would have access. So when you say we did not, there was no investigation in 2015 as to why they were gone. So how do we know that nobody from ITSS would have deleted?
We have records of, so we wouldn't have records of what was happening within Mr. Mix's account. However, we would log if we had changed the access rights. So we just can't go into, so if IT Shared Services wants to access someone's email account, we just can't access it. We take it over and we change the password, then we can go in and take action. That action would have been logged in our systems. So there's no record of ITSS changing the access rights in Mr. Mix's account.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so when you say ITSS would have to, so if I'm going now to get help from ITSS,
Yeah.
that's like that each one of those is logged. Like you don't have to necessarily go in and change your password. It's just when they take over.
We can remote to your desktop. So yeah, so if the user wanted us to assist them, so right now we have the capability to remote control computers. So with students, the student is notified if we remote to a desktop. They can't stop us. They just get an alert saying we're remoting. With a government user, we have it set up that if you called in and asked, I need help with my computer, the technician would say, can I remote to your desktop? You would say, yes, that'd be great. Or we would tell you, there would be a little screen pop up. Could you click OK? You're authorizing us to remote into your desktop. We would do the technical work and the such. So the technician specific to Mr. Mix in 2015 didn't remote. We dispatched an on-site technician, and he sat with Mr. Mix and assisted him to try to find those emails or see if there are issues with his account.
Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. So you're eliminating a whole bunch of possibilities here for me today, other than the fact that it would have to be either the employee or someone that went on the computer or a phone or anything at that time to remove a very specific timeline of emails. So you've eliminated the fact that there's no way anybody from ITSS was either ordered to do it or went in and undid it on their own or anything like that. you have said that, I'll go back to the upgrade on the phone. Have you ever seen in your time an upgrade to a phone lose emails from these?
No. The only thing I would say we've historically seen in the loss from moving from phone to phone are contacts. So we recommend that when you add a contact into your phone, you add it into your group-wise address book so that the address follows you. There are some times where users will be out and about and meet someone, and they'll just they'll go, "Oh, give me your contact information." They go into the phone, they add the phone number, email, and such, but they save it to the local device rather than to their account. So at the time of migration, as you get the new phone, anything you stored locally on the old phone would be lost in the migration, but all the emails are not. The emails are kept in the back end with our mobility servers, so emails aren't lost, but the most common loss of data between devices would be contacts if they were stored locally.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. So when you retire, what is supposed to happen is that your emails are deleted 12 months later, and there's a sign-off order for that. Is that correct?
No, I don't believe so. So right now, if we got a request form that an employee was retiring, we would, typically the form would come signed with proper authorization to give access to all the network files and emails to that user's supervisor and the records management officer of the department. And then they would go in and redistribute the file, do the records management, redistribute data to the other appropriate users in the department or the individual taking over the position of the retiree. And then we would wait, from IT Shared Services perspective, we would wait for the proper direction from the department to remove, delete any remaining records. And as I said, we have found over time there is a significant amount of orphaned data in government, and they're sitting on special servers that only the records management offices have because they're still working through how to classify, store, retain, redistribute that data within the departments.
Sid?
And sorry, John, I talked about current day, but I probably should have talked about prior to, let's say, 2016, to the AG report as well. Typically, if someone retired, the process for either deleting or archiving that account at that time. Can you remind us again of that process?
Yeah, I think, as I stated, I think since the new legislation around the 2017 timeframe, departments have become much more conscious, and I would say prior to that, we would have seen more commonly direction to delete accounts.
Sid?
Thank you. So, but can you walk me through like the way that would work? It's like, so someone retired in 2012. What would you typically get? Would you get like a batch of sign-off orders, or would they more often than not just be forgotten about, or or if you can give a percentage of the accounts that actually is it an automatic thing?
Historically, we would have, the form would have come in with the retirees, we would have given access to the supervisor at the time, because even prior to 2017, we didn't have identified records management officers for every department, so we weren't, and the forms weren't set up that way. We weren't dealing with records management officials, we were dealing with just the direct supervisor of the employee. So we would give access to all the files to the supervisor, and typically we would wait about a month, and then we would start reaching out to say, have you done your work? Are you completed? Are you ready to for us to take action on the account? And from there, the majority of the actions would have been to delete the account off the system.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. John, were you there when Chris Leclerc and Melissa McCachran's accounts were signed off to be deleted after they left?
I started government in 2012, so I don't think so. I don't think I was employed at that time.
Sid?
I'm good for right now, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, John. That conversation clarified a number of things for me. I appreciate that. I'm going to pick up on some things, though. And forgive me, this is my ignorance, but there was a question asked by Hal, I believe, about whether records could be accessed from, and he used the BINS administration as an example, and you said very unambiguously yes. And yet at a number of points during this conversation, 365 days later things get deleted has been expressed. So can you clarify for me, and this is my Commodore 64 brain versus where you are now, how those two statements are compatible?
So we have, as I stated, we have a lot of old data. So we have data back into the 90s. So we have emails, documents sitting on our servers from the 90s, absolutely, because no one's deleted them. So it's only when the user in the department presses delete, I have 365 days to go, they have 365 days to call and go, oops, I want that back. And then I can restore the file. But absolutely, the government has a significant amount of age data. So if the user didn't press delete, we still have that data, and we have a lot of it.
Peter?
This is a really critical point, John. So the user has the ability individually and independently to permanently triple delete all of their records from the server. Is that correct?
Correct, because IT Shared Services is not the owner of the data, we're the caretakers of the data. So the records are owned, and the files are owned by the departments. They have the ability to take whatever they deem as appropriate action. In that, we are keeping the backup for disaster recovery business continuity purposes, so that they say, oh, we made a mistake, we can't find that, we shouldn't have deleted it. They have 365 days to call us to say they'd like that data restored. So absolutely, the crowns, the departments, the agencies and boards all have the ability to self-manage their data. We just, the data that exists, we take care of. We have no authority over that data.
Peter?
Again, just for my own clarification here, John. So an individual employee has the ability and the authority to permanently delete all of their records by themselves without any help from or interference or oversight by ITSS.
Correct.
Or anybody else in their department?
No, so we control the access. So a good example would be an individual, you yourself could only impact your email, right? Because you're the only person, unless you've granted proxy. So if you go into your GroupWise, you could grant proxy to your account. So for example, if you had an administrative assistant and you wanted that administrative assistant to assist in managing your emails and your calendar, you as an individual, not ITSS, could provide proxy access to your administrative assistant, and then that individual would then have the ability, again, because you've granted them access, to take action on your account and delete, move any records. You would be the only one that would have access to your network home drive. So you could only take action against the records sitting in your home drive. However, you may have a shared drive. So we have numerous shared drives across government because there are working groups that have shared drives to share files. So any individual as part of that group that is we've given access to that share could take action against the records inside that share. So absolutely, government users have the ability to take independent action in relation to deletion of records.
Peter?
Thank you, John. Of course, an email originates in one email account and ends in another, or maybe many other accounts.
Yes.
When an individual deletes an email or a series of emails, or in this case, or I shouldn't say an individual, when records are deleted from a particular account, does that also delete the recipient's
No.
copy of that? So when you say that it is possible for an individual to delete records, that's only their own records. You would still have the corresponding record in another or a series of other files somewhere else.
Correct.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go back to the quote that the Chair the chair used, where the acting director advised it's not possible to tell if an email was deleted. And it went on, and her report goes on to say, such a determination would require a keystroke analysis, which is not something that ITSS does. Mm-hmm. So I'm really trying, again, my apologies for my lack of adeptness when it comes to understanding records management. But if the individual, we've been talking about Brad Mix today, and he was referenced in your files, if he or somebody in his department had deleted either consciously or accidentally all of his files and emails, those emails would still be present on the server somewhere, presumably in the recipient's box. Is that correct?
So if an individual sent an email and had copied other government users, though that email would exist in their group-wise inboxes as well.
Peter.
I'm not talking about copying here, John. I'm just saying the recipient.
Yes, the recipient. Yeah, if
there would be a record there.
If the recipient was within government, if the recipient was external to government, we wouldn't hold the recipient's email.
Okay.
It would have been transferred out of government to their email platform.
Peter.
Okay. And I noted that when you were answering Sid's questions, you gave two potential explanations for how these would be permanently and completely deleted. One was that it was deleted, and you've just explained why, particularly if it was an entity outside government, how that could happen. Or stored outside the government network was the other.
Because at the time, prior to 2015, the individual users could select where they wanted to archive their emails. So if a scenario would be as if a user at the time archived a portion of their emails to a thumb drive and then lost the thumb drive, those emails would be lost.
Okay.
Peter.
John, could you just run through what one would have to do? Say Peter Bevan-Baker wanted to permanently delete all of my emails from my account. I would never do that, but let's say I wanted to do that. What steps would I have to take?
I would prefer not to give that level of detail of how to bypass any of our systems. I would say that in order to do that, you would need to be familiar with the system. It would take numerous steps, and the actions would be time sensitive to do so.
Okay, Peter.
That's fair, and I understand the sensitivity of this, and I appreciate that, John.
Yeah.
So is that a process that conceivably or plausibly could be carried out accidentally, or would this be something that you're not going to pocket dial your way out to delete
you
all
would
of
have
your
to have
records?
intent.
Pardon me?
I believe you would have to have intent.
You would have to have intent.
It just there, as I said, there's several steps, time sensitive. It just doesn't happen. It would have to be some level of intent to do that.
Peter.
Would ITSS, and I'm not sure, maybe can you just tell us what a keystroke analysis is, and then I'll get to that series of questions.
So there's absolute technology that if we implemented, I would see every action you take on your computer, every key you touch, every file you open, everything you do, and would log it. So our perspective is right now with the fundings that is available, we have, once you're inside the government network and we've given you your Active Directory credentials, we've given you the proper level of accessibility to the data, you're a trusted user. So we're not tracking all the micro activities you're doing. We put a significant amount of tracking and data storage around your actions if you leave the government network. So you're inside the government network, you go to a website, we know what you're doing. We're watching because we're looking for any malicious activity, exfiltration of data to leave the network. We have a great deal of focus on that. We have a great deal of focus on recording if you're moving between our networks. So if you're a health user trying to get into core government, or if you're an education user trying to come into health, we're tracking between networks. But we're not tracking in micro level what you're doing every day at every moment on your computer. Technology absolutely exists and the capability is there to do so. We're just, again, haven't procured or implemented that technology.
Peter.
Would it be possible with the facility and the technology that we do have within government to go back to that time period and discern where that intent, you've used the word that one cannot do this accidentally, there would have to be intent, whether that was, that intent lay with the individual employee who generated these records, or whether there was administrative access given at another level so that a different employee, either within the department, you've mentioned ITSS was not involved here, but somebody else in the employee's department was given administrative access. Could you do a forensic audit, if that's the, I don't even know if that's the correct terminology, but to go back and discern where that intent, when and where that intent occurred and who was responsible for it?
No, based on back in the 2015 timeframe, we're not holding, as I said, the 365 days for us to hold the records that were occurring on the network or in those files has passed. So we just, at this point, based on the time of the ask, we don't have the capabilities to go back and kind of do that level of forensic details to figure out what happened.
Peter?
And is that because of the cost involved, John, or we don't have the
The technology just wasn't implemented at the time to record that action. There was no logs of such activities being recorded for the users.
Peter?
That's another critical element. So you're saying that regardless of how vigorously we try and track this back to exactly where the moment where that decision was made to permanently delete these emails, that there's no possible way that you or anybody else could determine that?
We weren't, as I said, we weren't logging any actions inside the group-wise application. So there was no way for us to see the actions any user was taking individually within that application. We're not recording those actions.
Peter?
One final question on this particular, because this is really the core of, I mean, this committee has a couple of purposes, but when we come to looking backwards, it's the deletion of this series of emails, which is what we're trying to determine here. I mentioned earlier that the email would have resided in at least one other, presuming it was within government, yes, or somebody was copied within government. Yeah. Is it possible to recreate that archive? I mean, this is my technical inability showing here. Would it be possible to recreate Mr. Mix's email, or at least that which existed within government, for that time by looking at recipients and you know, where the emails came back? Would that be possible?
Yes. So if the emails in question were sent to other government employees, and ITSS was given those names and those accounts, we could absolutely go into those other accounts and try to find the email.
Peter?
And has that been done?
No, not to my knowledge.
Peter?
Was it ever requested by anybody to try and recreate that time frame for which these emails were missing?
It has not come to me. So in my time and dealing with this file and assisting Mr. Mix and government, no one has provided us with a list of names that were copied on any type of correspondence and to look at their accounts specific to those emails Mr. Mix is missing.
Peter?
So again, just to clarify, John, it would technically be possible to recreate as far as the extent of those emails within government were distributed and copied. It would be possible to recreate within those parameters the email time period for Mr. Mix that has gone missing from his account.
If other government employees were copied on and their files existed, their accounts existed and such, yes, we would go in, and if they asked us to say, if, for example, Mr. Mix said employee A and employee B were copied on the email, this was the date of the email, we could go back to those employee A, employee B's accounts, look at that date, and see if the email exists in their accounts. Absolutely.
I appreciate it, presuming their accounts are not also deleted.
Exactly. Of course. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Corey?
Thank you, Chair. As part of the RCMP's investigation into the e-gaming file that I'm not sure exactly when they started. I think it was 2016, 2017. Who did they interview you, John?
No, I wasn't involved in the operations at that time, so I wasn't involved in those discussions.
Corey?
So I guess so neither of you would know who in IT would have been interviewed by the RCMP?
At that time, so the director prior to me was Ed Malone.
Corey?
I guess, since neither of you know, I guess I can't really, my follow-up questions you wouldn't know the answers to, so I'll pass it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Further questions? Ola?
Thank you, Chair. I understand that in your servers you maintain a lot of old files, and they keep existing on your most recent upgrades. How does the servers you have, how does they interface with the government's responsibility to maintain archives, files of stuff that has happened in the past?
And so, from our perspective, as long as the data is there, we're responsible to be caretakers of it. Removing that data is up to the records management officers in each department based on their retention schedule. So, as long as the files are there, we're responsible for maintaining them. So we back them up and store them. So, as Scott said, our from ITSS's perspective, we would be very happy if we were able to remove some of the older data and repatriate some of the storage and not have to maintain those older records. But having said that, the retention schedules vary across departments. So I know, for example, the Department of Transportation has a significant need for very long periods of time to keep records on bridges and et cetera, so they could be upwards of 20, 25 years they need to keep records around things of that nature, versus a simple record that can be removed after 5 or 7 years. But at this point, as long as the data is sitting in our systems, we'll take care of it and make sure it's accessible for the department.
Ola?
So you're considering the data safe, if you will? You don't feel you have a need to put it on whatever you put data on and put it in a box in the basement just to make sure that it's safe?
So we're quite comfortable with the variety of the storage systems we have. We have moved significantly to flash storage, which has no moving parts, which lessens the risk. As well, we duplicate the data between physical locations. So if one of our data centers physically exploded, all of government's data is replicated in another geographical location. So we feel we've put in place a robust environment where government's data is protected and is replicated for disaster recovery purposes.
Ola?
So the only thing it's not protected against is the intentional destruction of the data. If somebody can go in and destroy 20-year-old data if they wish, and if it doesn't get discovered within the 365 days period, it's gone.
Correct. As I said, ITSS has no mandate to have ownership or control over the data. We're just caretakers. The individual departments and users can take individual actions in regards to that data.
Ola?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Chair.
Peter?
Just following on from all those questions, you mentioned that the cloud storage is now part of government's backup strategy and policy. Are there any concerns regarding security of that cloud storage? And I'm thinking particularly here of international laws and the fact that you're now outside the jurisdiction of Canada.
Yeah, so we have and Scott can speak to this too, but we have a cloud strategy. We do privacy impact and threat risk analysis as we identify cloud partners. We absolutely, based on the classification of the data, our preference is to maintain cloud providers that have data centers inside the Canadian borders.
Peter?
So you said that that's your preference. So is all of the data from government that is stored on a cloud, is that all within Canadian jurisdiction?
Currently to my knowledge, with one exception, that is the students. So students heavily use the Google platform, and there was, through records management, they don't view anything created by students as a record of government. So the ability for the students to utilize Google, and Google replicates its data across the globe, that data is absolutely outside of the Canadian borders.
Peter?
And John, just for the record, can you explain why that's important, that we do retain the ability within Canadian law to manage data that's stored on cloud?
I kind of defer to you, Scott, on that one.
The primary reason why we prefer to do that is that when the data moves over a border to another country, then the data is subject to the privacy legislation of that country, right? So there are specific countries that have rather freer access to data, and their privacy laws allow that to happen. And in some senses, it's kind of a very subtle point, but our own Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act states that the head of the public body, right, has the right or the duty to disclose based upon certain rules in the legislation. In certain countries, data can be released based on the privacy laws of that country, removing that agency, if you will, of the head of the public body in Prince Edward Island to make that decision, right? So there's one of the reasons why we're uncomfortable with that.
Peter?
I appreciate that explanation, Scott. And so, John, you mentioned that your preference is, given
Yes.
what we've just heard, that we maintain it within Canada, and I, of
Yes.
course, would fully support that. So what measures is government taking to ensure that all of the data that we do store on cloud does indeed remain within national jurisdiction?
Yeah, so we, as I said, as departments identify solutions, or ITSS identify solutions that for cloud providers, we go through due diligence checklists, its RFP requirements, and a threat risk privacy analysis, and we confirm. So specific to Office 365, the primary data center for Microsoft is in Quebec, and their backup is in Toronto, and they think they're building a third one in Calgary. So they have a robust infrastructure within the Canadian borders. And we've also confirmed that not only is what we would deem production data, so data that users are accessing all the time is within Canadian borders, we also look at backup. So sometimes providers will ensure that production data is sitting in a data center inside Canada, but they're replicating data outside of the Canadian borders. So a good example of that is with Microsoft. So with what we're moving government's data into the cloud with Office 365, with email and the productivity suite, which is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., we've absolutely confirmed that all those services are maintained not only in production and backup in Canadian market. There are services Microsoft offers through their Azure platform that they cannot make that statement. So they may in the future, but as government looks at different services to go into the Microsoft cloud, we do an assessment of that service at the time to ensure both production and backup are staying. But absolutely, there are some services Microsoft could not guarantee that for us, because just how they've structured themselves with their platform, they are moving the data across the border, but we are absolutely working with the departments and assisting them, and ensuring as they identify services they want to go to the cloud, that they're taking that into consideration and making those evaluations.
Peter?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just tying up a few loose ends here as I was making notes. The first loose end is I talked last time I was asking questions about proxy access within a department. Can you explain the process for somebody receiving proxy access to an account?
Yes, so within GroupWise, and I don't know the step-by-step process, but you would go into File, Proxy, you would type in another existing user's name within the GroupWise environment, and a box would come up, and you would click, I want this person to have read, write, or just read access, so to emails, calendar, tasks, etc. So there'd be a list of systems within the application, and you would give the ability to read or write, so just a view type activity, or be able to take true actions within the system. That is, can solely be done by the individual users, and they do not require any intervention from IT Shared Services to do so.
Peter?
And given that very last sentence that you said there, John, is there any record anywhere in ITSS of who would have
Yes.
been given proxy access?
We can go into any account and we can see proxy rights. So if requested, I could go into any user's account and I could tell the user who has proxy access to their account.
Peter?
And does that also apply to the time frame for which these records went missing?
It would be at the time of the view. So if you asked me today who had proxy access to your account, I could go into your account and I could see the proxy list. If you asked me who had proxy list last week, if you changed it from last week to now, I couldn't see I don't believe, I would have to confirm, there might be logs in the system, and I don't know how long the logs are kept, but at initial view, we wouldn't be able to see, we'd have to probably go deeper into the application. Logs may be kept on what you did, but they wouldn't be kept permanently. That's why I couldn't answer that specifically.
Peter?
So I guess that's a question I would ask, John, if you could get back to the committee on that. If it is possible and if permanent records do exist for proxy access when it was given at the time, whether there would be any record on the government servers of that. I think that would be a really critical part of filling in gaps if it's possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Peter?
Chair. Going right back to the questions that Gord asked at the beginning regarding the data breach, which seems like a million years ago, again, being careful about what we divulge here, John, I know that there are sort of conventional and typical ways that hackers get into systems, and of course it's always a game and we're always playing catch up. But have we developed new safety protocols since that data breach in order to prevent a future occurrence like that?
Yes, we have significantly strengthened government systems, and we have taken action at the user level to limit the potential of what actions users could take to put us at risk, if I can put it that way.
Peter?
Yeah, that's where I'm going, John. Exactly. So I mean, human error, human frailty, human lack of knowledge is perhaps the weakest link here in terms of protection of that. So you sort of alluded to that in your answer there. I'm not quite sure how to ask this question. Presumably you can't eliminate that possibility entirely. So what are you able to do to protect the system from somebody just very innocently clicking on a link and causing all of the problems that we had before?
Yes. So we have enhanced the technologies that are screening all inbound communications to government. And you may have noticed just when you receive emails external to government, there are some warnings. So right now every time we receive an email, the system automatically checks all attachments, scans them. If we find anything malicious within the attachment, we remove the malicious activity and allow the email to be delivered. If we can't, we just don't allow the email to be delivered. In addition, we have taken steps to limit what we would deem as administrative rights on our devices significantly, so that even if a user takes action, they don't have the level, their login to the devices don't have the level of rights to allow a bad actor to take significant action. So those are kind of the two critical things I would say. But you're absolutely correct. We continue, and Scott may speak to an education program to keep the government users educated into they're part of our security profile. Absolutely.
Peter?
Scott, about that?
Did you? Okay.
I was struck by the statistic that you put up there, John, about emails delivered and emails removed from the system. It was like 2.5 times as many were removed as delivered. Would that statistic have been true prior to the data breach as well, or has that?
No, that's pretty consistent. It would have increased a little bit. We have put more restrictions in and are more aggressive on it, and it's a balancing act, because the general public, even worldwide, still needs to communicate with government and do business with government. So we're always in that balancing act of trying to be ensuring government's protected, but yet people still need to be able to come in and communicate and interact with government. So we're always in that balancing act.
Sure.
Peter?
Final area of tying up knots. It's the duty to document, and it's been discussed here, and you mentioned about so many platforms that retaining records and all of them would be just prohibitively expensive and complex. In the discussion that we had with the Privacy Commissioner, she talked about her support for duty to document. Government having a duty to document where decision points are made. So a couple of things. I'm wondering whether you have any advice from an ITSS point of view as to whether there's a particular platform that you would recommend that duty to document, should it go forward in legislation, and she had a particular recommendation as to where that should sit. Is there a method of documenting that you would recommend from an ITSS point of view that would ensure that we have full and complete documentation that would be easily accessible afterwards?
Did you want to mention the SEAM, Scott, or the SEAM?
Well, we're actually in the process of increasing our capability in that space. John had mentioned that we're currently not logging all the events that take place, primarily because you really don't have to capture everything. There are very specific things that you can log and then analyze, right? And that is that's a system called a Security Information and Event Management System. It takes in all of the logs that you are currently storing or keeping, right? And you can, to some extent, select which logs that you wish to retain. Again, recording everything is probably prohibitive because of the cost of storage, quite frankly. We're already under pressure, and if we were to log everything, that would increase that pressure tremendously. So this system basically, you can also imagine the amount of data that would be collected across the 10,000 or more users that we currently have. So it's very important that there is a means to analyze that and automatically, right? You're not going to have a person going through every line of log looking for specific events. There are programs that will do that for you in a much faster fashion, and that is a security information and event management system, which we're actually in the process of procuring. The other mitigation here, and we've had these discussions, is right now our end user has the capability to arbitrarily delete records. With the implementation of an electronic records management system, that will mitigate that risk, because once you label something as a record, then the ability to access and modify or delete that record can be restricted to records information managers, right, as opposed to the individual who owned and created the record in the first place. So two recommendations there. Obviously, we would be tickled pink to be able to implement an electronic records management system on top of Office 365, coupled with our security information and event management system that will really provide us with what we're lacking now, which is visibility, right, into activities.
Peter?
That was a lovely note to finish on, actually, John, because the other part of this committee's work is to look forward and create for PEI gold standard records management system, and you've just described a portion of that, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Ola?
Oh, I just had one question relating to archiving. The user can opt to archive stuff, and I was wondering if they choose to archive emails or other files, where does that reside and what happens to it and who has a control of it?
So since, specific to group-wise, since 2015, if the user just chooses to archive their email environments, it can only go to, we have a series of servers that it can only go to. So the user has no ability to select the location of the archive. if they want to archive, they're coming into our archive system, and it's consolidated within our data centers.
Ola?
And once it resides there, who then has access to it? And can it be deleted from the archives?
No, well, again, the user themselves could access their archives and delete any data within that archive. The individual users would have access to their own archives.
Ola?
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. I'll just add a couple, just to add on to this, what Ola just mentioned. Can you track if our records out of archives have been deleted by, like, as if it was similar to on the server?
No, it would be the same. We're not tracking to that level, but again, we can restore the archives in the 365 days. So a user goes in, takes action, decides, I want that back, or I shouldn't have done that. They have 365 days to contact us, and we can restore the data within the archive.
Okay, thank you. I just have one area that I just kind of like to jump into for a minute. So the Auditor General has provided a lot of recommendations across a lot of departments over a lot of years. And many of those have been indicated that they're ITSS dependent in order to implement the recommendation. Is there a process where ITSS meets with departments after the AG has submitted the report, where you would go through the AG report and identify ITSS dependent recommendations?
I can answer that. Yes, there is. We would periodically review the AG reports and basically record the activities that mention a department working in cooperation with ITSS. In a lot of instances, the departments have already contacted us. In others, we would contact them based on that list. And as these are completed, right, we also keep a record of the date when they are.
So, and a lot of that is about records management, right? So, because many departments are still on paper files. So, but if some of the systems were moved over to software, then potentially the record keeping and keeping it up to date would be easier for the department and less labor intensive. Do you review that specifically and do any kind of prioritization as to how you would be able to start improving our records management system through that method?
In terms of information technology actions, right? But not necessarily which of the recommendations. If I got your question, we don't actually prioritize which recommendations get done. That's properly in the place of the department.
Right. I guess I'm looking for consultation. So if you're familiar with software that might take care of a recommendation that the Auditor General had identified, do you work in consultation with the department to identify possibilities?
Yes, absolutely. Right.
Okay. And I guess do you prioritize based on, so for instance, if it's a high-use system, do you prioritize or assist in the prioritization? And I'm thinking when it comes to budget time. So when you are requesting operational dollars or capital dollars, are you trying to associate some of those needs against the Auditor General recommendations as well?
Yeah, it's more of a collaborative effort, I think, between the departments and ourselves. But I am aware of instances where we would certainly have done that.
Okay. And in the absence of software being able to implement some of those recommendations that are policy-based, and we've heard that, we're waiting for software to happen, therefore we can't implement or we can't be compliant with what the AG findings are. Do you work with the department to assist in interim policies while the department is waiting for, because my understanding is it's IT resources. IT resources is also part of the long critical path in order to implement some of the recommendations.
Right.
Can you speak to
There
that a
may be
bit?
other reasons as well. If from an enterprise perspective, you don't want a dozen different solutions for the same problem. It's much more efficient and it reduces costs tremendously to have a solution that works for all of government. And so we may be taking that into consideration as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, just one specific set of recommendations. The department referenced that they used their 2 years of IT hours in order to implement the solution. And it was within Health PI actually, and they were being proactive in order to implement it. Is there a certain a number of hours allocated to the departments, or how does that work?
If you gave me the year of the recommendation, I might be able to answer, but right now, I'm not aware of any allocation,
Okay.
right?
So if a department finds that they're in need of IT software or any kind of upgrades to what they currently have, how do you move through that process then and ensure that you have the financing in place to be able to purchase the software licenses or the platform or?
Yeah, we do have a priority setting mechanism that tries to be objective based upon a series of different criterias, right? So certain projects will be rated as a higher priority if they are enterprise in nature, and it's going to solve a problem for all of government. But there's a whole host of characteristics that we would look at when we're prioritizing projects in general, but also just everyday requests, right?
And we have IT consultants that are assigned to every department
Okay.
and agency. So if a department or agency was looking to move forward IT work, they would engage their IT consultant, and that would be their conduit into IT shared services. And they would assist the department with strategic plans, to Scott's point, trying to, can you move your ask into an enterprise type level ask that's can be applied across multiple departments or agencies.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Any other further questions from anybody? Okay. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank you for coming in and providing us with your very thoughtful answers to all of our questions. And we will take a short recess while we just make a quick change here. Okay? Thanks. All right, we're going to resume. Of the Special Committee on Government Records Retention. So next on our agenda is a review of the correspondence, and I will share, so the department responses have been gathered. Is there any departments that are still outstanding, Ryan?
No, as far as I know, they've all responded.
Okay, that's great news. So first of all, thank you to all the departments, because that was a lot of information to compile in a very short period of time. So I would just like to send out a thank you across government to say thank you for pulling that information together for us in such a timely manner. So there are printed copies for anybody who had requested a printed copy, and so you could take those with you as you go. You might need a trolley to take them out with you, but other correspondence, there was some letters received and sent. Those were sent to all of the committee members in their email. So if there's any concerns, or if you haven't received those correspondence from Ryan, you can reach out to him. Has anybody else received any correspondence that they'd like to share? Okay. So next would be review of our scheduling. So I'll open the floor to if anybody has any names that they would like to put forward for witnesses that they would like to see. Go ahead, Sid.
Thank you, Chair. When Corey was asking questions, they had talked about the former Director of IT, who would have been interviewed by the RCMP. You do have the name there?
I do. It's Ed Malone.
Yeah, that's, I would move that we invite him in.
Okay. Any discussion? No? Everybody okay with that? So, all in favor, I guess? That's the words I'm looking for. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we'll call Ed Malone. Any others, Sydney?
It's good for me.
Okay, any other members? Hal?
Any specific dates set yet for anyone to appear?
Ryan?
There's a meeting scheduled for next Friday, the 25th, where Jill MacMicken-Wilson, the Provincial Archivist, and Bethany MacLeod, Deputy Administrator of Education, will appear. And then for the month of October, it's essentially our dates are Wednesdays and Fridays alternating, and invitations have gone out to Brad Mix, Bobby Joe Dow Baker, Chris LeClaire, and Melissa McCackern, and I've put dates to them, and I haven't received replies yet.
Okay, Hal, thank you. Okay, Peter?
The clerk and myself have been in correspondence, but I mentioned Juliana McEwen as a records management expert here in Prince Edward Island, and I know she's willing to come in, so I would like to propose that Juliana McEwen be brought in. No relation, I don't believe. Sid?
No. Well, no. I
Okay.
can tell you about that later.
All right. So Juliana McEwen, she owns a company that specializes in records management. It's Precision Document, I believe. I'll just. Thank you. Yes. So she was recommended as an expert in records management. Any discussion on that? Okay, is everybody in favor of having Julianne McEwen come in? Yes, okay, thank you. So Julianne McEwen. Do we have anybody else that we'd like to call? Okay, so if there's no other names, I'll ask for any new business. Okay, and if there's no new business, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Peter, thank you.